Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're discussing who the Space Wolf Primarch Leman Russ is hunting within the Eye. So yesterday morning I was heading out into the cold for a long dog walk with the pup, and I decided to re-listen to the audiobook Parting of Ways. It's a story focused on Bjorn the Fell-Handed, covering the moment that Russ leaves the chapter, leaving Bjorn behind, as well as his death and interment within a dreadnought. It's only about an hour long, but my word, this one is a good one. Honestly, I really recommend checking it out if you never have, because it is absolutely fantastic. Doubly so if you're a Space Wolf fan. And while there's a couple of discussions that sprang to mind for me wanting to discuss from this, the first one is another chat on why Russ left, what he has gone to do. Because if we disregard all the codex teases and references from other older novels out there, such as the Ragnar Blackmane series for example, the reason implied here is actually very specific. The scene of Russ's infamous speech and abrupt departure is of course legend. However, here you get a few details not mentioned in other retellings. Firstly, as the assembled chapter is feasting within the Grand Hall, Bjorn the Fell-Handed watches and senses the mood turning sour, the jovial brawls amongst his brothers turning vicious, knives being drawn, and shadows deepening around the hall, with a fell wind sweeping in from beyond the mountain. And Russ senses this change, watching the scene devolving before him, his eyes growing icy cold, before getting up and shouting no more, silencing the entire chapter immediately, whereupon he would go into his famous speech. And this scene within the hall definitely implies something was transpiring here. It could simply be a build for the drama. It could be the spirits of Fenris warning Russ of what would come, what would transpire in the future grimdark. It could perhaps have been the Allfather, the Emperor as long believed, warning Russ in a similar manner as he spoke to Valdor. Or it could even have been something indeed fell, something to do with the ruinous powers, though that one is perhaps less likely. And secondly, Russ's words here are a little more condemning at first, before he moves on to the more fabled inspiring speech. He declares the Emperor, his father, was of an age of gods, but that they are slumped in an age of mortals. He states that the stars will fade, and that his brothers and Malkador are gone, and the Golden Throne is surrounded by leeches, and that most of all they were shamefully not there on Terra, ominously stating it remains unfinished. And we get a teasing reference that it's not clear if he's still speaking to his men, or maybe another unknown presence. And then thirdly, there's some very key lines that reference Russ going on a specific hunt, and not the Tree of Life quest that's referenced elsewhere. He states he has an oath to keep, that there are beasts left to slay, and upon uttering those words Russ becomes seized by premonition, and smiles. And then after the For the Wolf Time ending, Russ gives his retinue the battle sign to muster and makes to leave. And we hear Bjorn's thoughts here, which again tell us it's a hunt for a specific prey. He wonders what Russ saw that changed his mood so violently, and then who they are hunting. And they are of course questions that Bjorn never gets to ask his Primarch, as Russ then immediately turns to tell him, "Not you," famously leaving Bjorn behind. And these are moments that us as fans have debated for years, decades even for some of us. Again, combined with the other references out there, making it feel he could well have gone to find a way to heal his father. And indeed, that's still very possible. However, when you listen to this moment in the parting of ways in totality and in isolation, it all feels much more violent, if you will. The dark mood that sweeps the hall, the condemning words of Russ, the oath to keep, and beasts still to slay, surely feeling like a reference to his executioner role to his father, that there is something to kill, and not a quest of healing. And maybe being seized by premonition after uttering those words is a sign the Emperor agreed. Who knows? But we have already seen with Lionel Johnson that those decades-old Codex references don't necessarily mean much when a Primarch does return in the current lore, as Lionel Johnson awoke somewhere completely different from the Rock that we always expected. And indeed, the Rock had absolutely nothing to do with his return at all. And there's even a fun little moment within Parting of Ways, where Bjorn returns to Fenris after a prolonged absence, and he hears new rumours of Russ having left for the Tree of Life, and it makes clear that those rumours have clearly arisen in the years after Russ's departure, implying that they are not to be believed. And so if we just take this story by itself, ignoring all the other lore references out there, then Leman Russ left to hunt someone or something, to slay it. So, who is it? What is it? And is it just one? Well, the obvious and easy answer is his traitor brothers, the Demon Primarchs. And indeed, that could tie in with Magnus the Red possibly knowing where Russ is elsewhere within the lore. But it begs the question, if Russ left to hunt his traitor brothers within the Eye, well then, why has there been no sign of him since? Nothing, not a peep, when we have seen many of the Demon Primarchs elsewhere. We've seen Korax make an appearance pursuing Lorgar, and most of the other traitor Primarchs have now returned to the galaxy. And most keenly, he doesn't have the Emperor's Spear within his possession, perhaps the only weapon he had that would truly be capable of ending a Demon Primarch. But hey, I guess that's not stopping Korax after all. The logical assumption is Magnus the Red. Magnus teased he knows where Russ is, and he has continued his vendetta against the Sons of Russ. And he had an ominous reunion and stand with a statue of his brother within the Fang, breaking it over his knee, as Russ did to him. So your heart does have to say that they will face each other again someday. However, Magnus has been the most active traitor Primarch in the galaxy since the Heresy. He's even moved the planet of the Sorcerers out of the warp and reclaimed the ruins of Prospero. While of course it could still end up being Magnus, logically speaking you would have thought we would have seen sign of Russ by now, given how active Magnus has been. Mortarion then, again another one who's been very prominent in the lore, prosecuting his plague war against Guilliman within Ultramar. With that obsession of beating Guilliman that Mortarion had, Surely you would have to think that that makes having Russ harassing him somewhere pretty unlikely. If you had the Wolf King after you, you wouldn't be too worried about Guilliman. So in that case, what about Angron? Well, that's one I can't really see. He returned to Armageddon and then was epically banished by the Grey Knights, and now is continually reappearing and rampaging around Imperium Nihilus, last known to have been slain by El Johnson upon Wormwood. So Angron for me is another unlikely one. As we know for Lorgar, he's got Korax on his tail, and if Leman was there too, you would have surely expected a reference in that encounter we have already seen. So that makes Lorgar unlikely. And so that leaves Perturabo and Fulgrim as, practically speaking, perhaps the most likely options. Both of them largely unseen and yet to return to the galaxy in a major way. Though of course that's about to change with the Phoenician. Perturabo has been involved with a couple of Abaddon's Black Crusades and led the War of Rust and Ruin against Mortarion. So he's at least done a few things, whereas Fulgrim was pretty much completely incommunicado. So that does make Fulgrim technically a better option, having room to say that he's actually been battling Russ at times off-screen, as it were. And of course with him returning now, we could perhaps get a little tease or reference to the Wolf King somewhere. However, for me, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right somehow. It feels far more like that Fulgrim would have been busy simply on Slaaneish's paradise world, immersed in his own agenda, shall we say. And so it's tricky. It's real tricky. If Russ did indeed leave to hunt one of his demon kin, then it's really not obvious which one it was, and why we haven't seen any sign of him. One caveat we have to remember is time does flow differently within the Eye of Terror and Warp, which is why Abaddon is still in his prime after 10,000 years in the real galaxy. So for Leman Russ, it most likely hasn't been long at all, which could be an explanation for why we haven't seen him, and maybe how he could well be stalking one of his traitor brothers still, despite their appearances elsewhere. However, I will say, for me, the complete lack of sightings and references of Russ elsewhere is why the Tree of Life quest does make sense, because he's seeking that rather than a brother. That he's trapped or busy within the Garden of Nurgle, a realm and place we haven't really seen. And it was also why I thought that would be a great tie-in to Guilliman or the Emperor burning the Garden of Nurgle. That maybe could have been an encounter that somehow aided Russ in some way. That it could have been used to lead to his eventual return. And in thinking about it, maybe that logic could still work in this hunting specific idea. Maybe Russ did indeed go for Magnus the Red first, which is why Magnus could know where he is. Maybe Russ is within the maze of Tzeentch, the Crystal Labyrinth. The labyrinth spreads across the warp and the domain of the Chaos God Tzeentch, and is said to be a maze of ever-changing illusions, showing dreams, nightmares, hopes and misery, turning its invaders to insanity, lost forever within its passageways. And obviously Russ wouldn't lose his mind, but he, as much as anyone, would find it hard to escape. And it could explain why Magnus knows where Russ is, but that he can't do anything about it, and why we haven't seen any sign of the Wolf King. That somehow during Russ's pursuit of Magnus, he entered into the domain of his patron. The maze is said to link each of the other Chaos God's domains, as well as who knows where else. So it's very possible that Russ could have entered the maze, maybe even not knowing what it truly was. And even if he did, I think it's entirely keeping with Russ's character to enter this foreboding maze of Tzeentch in a chance to reach Magnus. There's no evidence or solid facts to support it, but from what we know, and going along with the oath to keep and beast to slay notion, it definitely could work. At least in my opinion. Because there has to be a reason Russ hasn't been seen. And if he left to slay beasts and keep his oath to his father, then the logical assumption has to be his demon kin. But as always everyone, what do you think? If Leman Russ indeed left to hunt someone or something specific, then who do you think was his prey? Was it simply his demon brothers in general? And if so, who do you think was the first one? Does it have to be Magnus the Red? And if so, could the Maze of Tzeentch be key? Or could it even be Perturabo or Fulgrim? Two Primarchs still at this point largely kept off screen. Could maybe with the return of Fulgrim, we be in store for a tease of Russ to come? As always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. A huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too? But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.